Okay, so good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Alan Lamont from Bentley Systems. I'm just here to say a couple of words about the location we're hosting this event today. I'm not sure how many of you know Bentley Systems, but we provide software for the infrastructure industry. And this academy is set up really as part of an ongoing process which Bentley is supporting in the UK to roll out initiatives, future visions, standards, and to try to support those standards in the industry at large. We address the infrastructure industry from buildings to sewers to water, wastewater, right the way through the life cycle of an asset, we say. So from conceptual design right the way up to asset management. And so people come to this academy as a neutral place just to listen to the industry and to peers and to groups like yourselves to understand what's going on in the industry and how they can progress the industry faster within their own organizations. So we've had about 4,500 people go through this room in the last 3 or 4 years. 708 companies, about 29 countries, probably the number of countries increased today. But it's quite an internationally renowned location now. We've had governments from Singapore come through here as they set up their own BIM standards and wanted to understand how the UK BIM standards were developed. The people who run this academy are actually working in the industry, in the BIM initiatives, in the BIM standardizations initiatives, anything to do with pushing the infrastructure industry along and pushing it forwards. So we try to be completely neutral. It's not about Bentley, it's about the industry. And this is Greg Bentley's commitment really to the infrastructure industry to advance things forwards. We've had Crossrail onboarding sessions here, where Crossrail said they had the process, they understood the technology, but they wanted to get the people onboarded. They didn't have the facility or capacity to do that, so they just wanted people to just understand what the process is in the industry. And that was the important aspect. What they're doing contributing to the project, and why is it contributing to the project? So what you see here is different workstations around the project, which then demonstrate exactly what their contribution is, and then they just demonstrate on the case of asset tags and the like, why they're doing what they're doing. And then they go away, do their part of the project, but they've understood what they're contributing to the overall goal of the project.
Welcome everyone to INFRA BIM London 2018. Let me briefly introduce myself. I'm Rafael Riera, the Director of the BIM department at Zigurat Global Institute of Technology. Today we are here in London in the Bentley offices. Thank you very much for Bentley for hosting us. And we are here to discuss about how BIM is being implemented in the infrastructure world. Okay, and we are gonna make 2 roundtables of 75 minutes. We want to be very interactive. Okay, so we want your questions. We have collected some questions from the public. Okay, and we will try to answer all the points that you may have. So we're going to start with this first roundtable. Okay, we're going to have it here in the screen. It's the table about the industry. Okay, and here we want to talk about how BIM is being implemented in governments, how are the standards, how are the main requirements, and which are the countries that are leading BIM in this field. Okay. And for this table, we have Mr. Dejan Pavic. He's from the Advanced Academies Manager at Bentley Systems. We have Mr. Ashraf El Gabri, BIM Manager of the Abu Dhabi International Airport, okay, from CCC. And we have also Nicholas Nisbet, the Vice Chair at Building Smart UK and Ireland. Okay. And let's start, okay, with the first topic that we have, which is governments mandating BIM, status, where, when, and how. Okay, we have the first question for Nicholas. Because of your experience developing the standards in the UK, the country leading this revolution worldwide, okay, which are the main challenges that governments face?
I think there are 3 challenges governments face. One is whether to use legislation. And one or two countries in Europe have gone down the route of using primary legislation to require the use of BIM. The second challenge they have is that they are very often regulators. And that's an opportunity they have to support the industry and encourage the use of technology. But the main one is around the world is that all governments want better value for money. Whatever you build, 50% is physical material and the other 50% is management and organization and labor. And there's a constant challenge for any government to get better value and to be better owner. And that's what we've seen in the UK, is the UK government trying to be a better client. And that's led to, well, that was inspired by anxiety about whether they were getting value for money and anxiety about whether the way they were procuring projects was actually enabling them to run the asset well afterwards. And so that's what set off the UK on its initiative. And I think that remains the challenge, starting with problems about handover and acquiring assets, and going further as to whether they really are good assets and making sure that that can be tested. So I think the challenge for governments is always to get value for money for their citizens, especially on very large projects.
Yeah, Mr. Dijen, once all assets are digitalized, which benefits should governments have?
So there are many benefits that the governments can realize, starting obviously with the project delivery, more efficient, better running of assets, better service provision. We're looking at social outcomes, improved social outcomes for everyone using our infrastructure assets. And ultimately, the governments are obviously looking to increase their GDPs. So that's their main goal. But once we digitalize our assets, we're taking things even further, looking at things like smart infrastructure, for example. We need to understand how assets are behaving and what impacts they have one on another. We are still quite far from there, but we're on a good way to get there. And that's, I think, what's going to be really important, creating that smart infrastructure. Maybe self-managing is the ultimate step, but before that, just understanding, how asset is feeling, what's its condition, what's its effect on the other assets, and such.
Okay. Could you put any example, for example, of Crossrail or?
Well, on Crossrail, they did quite a few interesting pilot projects. So one of them was in collaboration with the CSIC, Cambridge Center for Smart Infrastructure in Construction. They've installed various sensors in the underground stations, and what they discovered was that they use way too much reinforcement for certain things. Such lessons learned will be used on Crossrail 2 to generate huge savings, tens of millions of pounds, as they'll be able to apply those on multiple stations.
Okay, Mr. Ashraf, we have a question from Egypt. Okay, they ask, what about in the Middle East? Are governments demanding the new projects under this new paradigm?
Well, this part of the world is totally different, as the development are going very fast with vast infrastructure development, racing at the same time all types of regulations important from all over the world. With the stacks of built projects, there is a huge challenge of surveying all the assets, either underground utilities or, let's say, above the ground. And lately, in UAE was a huge revolution towards BIM, started by, let's say, sharing our experience as one of the biggest general contractors at that area of the world. We started by different governmental and private sector where we played the role model in leading this industry. And I remember we succeeded since 2009 to drive and to steer this business in the region. Right now, Dubai in UAE is leading this technological revolution and try to build a role model country in GCC, between GCC countries. And this is quite promising, and they are going very aggressively in that direction.
Are the governments prepared to ask for BIM? Do they know what they are asking?
Well, of course, they start from, let's say, the standards around, let's say, the region, sharing the standards like from, of course, UK and USA. Of course, I cannot say that there's a full implementation in that region, but they try to build, or let's say, to share the experience of a joint implementation in the region. And one of the most successful practical implementation rendered so far in this region is MTB, Midfield Terminal Building, which is a quite mega joint project and totally steered and driven by BIM implementation, huge BIM practical implementation.
Mr. Dejan, which is your point of view?
Sorry?
Which is your point of view from Bentley Systems?
So I actually want to bring up another point about governments mandating BIM. So in the UK we are quite lucky, let's say, because the government can do that. In some countries that's just not possible, or it's much harder. You know, if I take, let's say, Germany as an example, you know, it's made up of a number of states, and well, each of the states will do something on their own. You know, if we take that wider to the European context, the EU has published the BIM guidance, but each of the countries will still create their own strategy, BIM strategy, and implement it in the way they see fit. Now, on the one hand, obviously that's understandable. Each country is a country of its own, but you know, if we want to drive the big benefits, you know, the social outcomes, we need to work together in a better way. You know, we need that global connection. You know, also a lot of the supply chain, they work all over the world. You know, well, obviously it's much easier if you do things similarly. You know, wherever you go. Same example, let's say the United States, the federal government can't mandate something like they did in the UK, you know. Each of the states will have to do it on their own. But even that is very, very hard. If we take New York area as an example, I was there in November, and they're trying to do something, I call it middle out, you know. So you've got those huge tier one contractors, you've got the top universities, and you've got the huge owner-operators, you know. They're trying to organize themselves, create different industry groups, and I guess kind of copying the UK example to them, but not using not being governmentally driven, you know. So they're trying to do it from the middle, influence their supply chain and influence the government at the same time.
Nicholas, you from an European vision,
Yeah.
which are the countries that are leading this BIM revolution in Europe?
Okay, well, I think the strength of the UK strategy was, in the end, it boiled down to the client as a customer demanding data. And we got the EU procurement directive changed so that quality of data was a valid criteria. And I think that's the strength of it. So everything that followed from that, huge interest in BIM and the development of all standards, just followed from that simple idea. Government was going to demand data, not just documents, as part of the handover. So I think we've developed some standards which are very good on process, and we're starting to get good at doing data. I think if looking around Europe, if you went to Norway or Finland, you would see two countries which are very good at the data, but haven't necessarily given the attention to the correct processes for collaboration that we've invested in. And I think you can take good from both. And I think that's why governments can adopt BIM by demanding the outcome from BIM, which is usable data. And as a client, as a customer, that seems manageable. I think the change to the EU procurement directive was actually incredibly important, because it meant that small states, small countries, big countries can actually move into that area and start to trigger the changes that government wants, without necessarily telling the industry how it has to do it. And in fact, the generation of the standards that we've produced in the UK are now being taken up at ISO level and at CEN level, so that they can be used anywhere around the world. And that's very exciting, that they've been recognized in that way.
Okay, thank you. We're going now to the private sector. Okay, Mr. Dijan. Are private owners demanding BIM projects?
Well, definitely. I mean, the demand for BIM is huge. Building information marketing did a great job, I think, in promoting BIM around the world. You know, everyone wants it, but what does that mean? You know, that's the biggest issue, because people don't actually understand it, let's say. You know, so I think that's why discussions such as this one and then sharing this globally is so important. You know, actually, this is what Alan was talking about earlier. What we are trying to do through the advancement academies. I know some people in the audience have already visited us here and discussed different topics, you know, and we are trying to do this globally, you know, in a number of locations, raise the awareness of the industry in this way, and I think in such a way can we actually achieve what we are trying to achieve. Good data, as Nick said, as the outcome.
Okay, the next question is for Nicolas from Spain. It says, why BIM adoption in infrastructure field lags obviously behind the adoption in building projects?
There isn't a simple answer. I think infrastructure projects tend to have strong clients, and the contractors have learned how to provide, or are learning how to provide data to the strong clients, but the design and engineering sector has been isolated from the demand from data. It's completely opposite in the building sector, where the architects and engineers knew they had a problem about data and started to invest in information modeling 40 years ago, and especially in the last 10 years. And the contractors have picked up on that, but in general with building, we don't have clever clients. And so it's tended to remain fairly isolated and limited in its ambitions. So there's a difference between infrastructure and building, that the building sector, especially on the design side, knew it had a problem, but it didn't have clients that were interested. It's the opposite way around in infrastructure.
What do you think, Mr. Tijan, from Bentley, that you can see the difference of demanding, maybe ICOSIM and other softwares?
So on Crossrail, they mandated Bentley software. You can argue it's both good and bad. I think it's good because of the way Crossrail did it. So they helped all the contractors adopt the technologies, the processes that go with them, that drive them actually. They provided free licenses to anyone working on the project. They provided free training. They created, together with Bentley, the Crossrail Bentley Information Academy. So they did everything to help the supply chain deliver what their ultimate goal is, and that's a pure common data environment which everyone who takes data out of it trusts. So they have the right data at the right time, and it's not something that you can do always, but it worked very well on Crossrail, I think.
Okay, so let's jump to the next point, okay, which is BIM in the ICO's digital transformation. Okay, we have a question, Mr. Ashraf. Okay, this question comes from England. It says now the term digital transformation is shaking the wall. Is the building sector ready steady for this revolution?
It depends around the implementation, actually. Now, let's say your maturity in construction or the construction industry in general, it's all based on information and how you track and follow and your different sets or modules of that types of information, and you deal with it fast and in a kind of agile modules in construction. And as I mentioned before, if we are talking about the Middle East, most of the giant projects and early infrastructure were built out of BIM environment or digital world. So it will take some time to build all this 3D networks, and it's going to take much effort, let's say, for the digital survey as a start. Digital survey, by the way, start from digital documents. We're now still dealing with ordinary paperwork, ordinary files, so it will take some time. I believe within this upcoming, not less than at least 5 years, 5 to 10 years, we are going to stand to say we are at the right track of the digital transformation in the sense of the Middle East.
Would you like to add anything?
Well, I think the speed of adoption, we've spent 6 years, nearly 7 now in the UK with our transformation program. Singapore did it in 3 years, 4 years, a decade ago. So I think the time it takes it's doable in shorter and shorter space of time because the experience is out there, the tools are out there, the knowledge is there. And I'd also say that it's important that the open standards are out there for use. That if everyone in the industry is going to join in, then we need ways of making sure that everyone can use the best tools for them, but using information that is in common with everyone. And that's a major accelerator for getting innovation. If people can invest in the tools they want to use or the best tools for the job, then adoption will be much faster.
Okay, we jump to the next point, which is main barriers for the implementation of this new paradigm in companies in the private sector. Okay, we can start with Mr. Dijan. Okay, we have a question from Italy. It says, you experienced that the lack of readiness among the UK construction industry stakeholders when BIM became mandatory in 2016. Which are the main challenges for companies in the implementation of BIM?
Well, there's a number of them, definitely. And now I'm going to feel as a parrot repeating myself, but the number one, I think, is still understanding it, lack of understanding is huge. I mean, the other one is definitely business cases. You know, everyone's picking the low-hanging fruit, but no one wants to tackle the big problems. So I thought those two would be the main ones that I think.
I think the most important that BIM is the only environment which can, let's say, unite the three or the vital elements of success, starting from clarity, ending up by parameters and information. And we cannot, let's say, transform unless we have those elements, let's say, equally, with the equal attention, and they cannot see a different environment or different savior, let's say, except BIM in this world of construction industry.
How could the return of investment?
Different aspects, actually. Yeah, we are dealing with time, we are dealing with dollar sign, and we are dealing with the quality and BIM on top of everything. And don't forget later on, if this is my, let's say, industry, the construction industry, don't forget also building for better operation and maintenance and follow up in facility management. And you cannot deal with such mega projects with the infrastructure without dealing with particular details in all these 3-4 modules. Under BIM environment, I think this is the only answer for all these parameters.
Nicholas, how is the UK government measuring the return of investment?
Okay, well, I think it's important to remember that the mandate was a mandate from our Treasury on those 7 or 8 government departments that actually build. And so I think 40% of the construction industry is public sector in the UK. Only 20% is centrally controlled. So the mandate only affected 20% of the industry. And lo and behold, at 2016, about 20-25% of the industry was saying that it was BIM aware and capable. And that's exactly what we expected. These were people, the organizations that were working with central government that were prepared to lead, whether they were architects or engineers or contractors. In terms of measuring the return on investment, the success of it, we did some pilots in 2006 on which the British standards were based, and they showed savings of around 10%, and the British standards were based on those projects where that had been achieved. And you can go to the Treasury website now, the Cabinet Office, and you can see how those central government departments have been achieving or heading towards savings of around 20% on BIM projects since the initiative started in 2011. Some were further ahead. The Ministry of Justice was our pilot, and they're very confident in the savings. And I think in terms of construction costs, the numbers are there. To find out the savings in the design and engineering sectors, I think you have to look at Lonely BIM and just talk to individual organizations that have adopted BIM, and they will quietly admit that they are saving much higher percentages on their design and construction processes anyway. So they're ready to start collaborating because they've already got their benefit. And then in due course, we hope that when we look at the assets that are being better managed and better used, we will find numbers, maybe not 50%, maybe not 20%, but if 5% of the operating costs are saved on your prisons or your courtrooms or whatever, these are huge numbers, and so on. So the numbers are there now, to say there is no doubt.
we don't know how to actually use the data. So quite often it seems like we are just creating it and collecting it to satisfy the contractual requirements. But we need to build on top of that. All the digitally savvy industries, they take the data that they need to create and they build on top of it by, slicing and dicing it in different ways, analyzing it, combining it with free external data from other suppliers, from their suppliers, from their, and in this way they get more out of it, We are very, very bad at monetizing the data that we are creating.
Yes, here we could say that that's true. How we manage all this data that is being created from different buyers. So yeah, we are now in the area of the big data, no? And it's how to manage all this data that we are creating. That this is maybe one of the barriers of governments, that maybe they're not prepared to manage and to work with all of this data.
I think managing it is not such a big issue. We've got everything there. I mean, it's been proven over and over again in other industries. Do we employ enough data scientists? Let's call them that way. I guess not. I think not.
Okay, so now we jump to the next topic, okay, which is the strategies that a government or a country can have, okay, between top-down and bottom-up strategies. Mr. Ashraf, in terms of efficacy, in your opinion, which is the best strategy, top-down or bottom-up?
The level of infrastructure projects, we start always by top-down for strategy, and for BIM implementation, it's bottom-down implementation, because you have to deal with systems and subsystems building up, but let's say within an envelope of a clear vision of the final destination. So it's both strategy, top-down, implementation, bottom-up.
The UK government vision, and in general, the management vision is of a lean strategy, which is about pull. It's about customers making their requirements clear and pulling from their supply chain the information they need. And that obviously applies to clients who are going to be operating these assets, but it applies all through the various chains, the design chain, the supply chain. But if customers can express what they need clearly, you can cut out waste. So I guess the sensible, the economical approach is pull, and that essentially is top down. I spent a lot of years listening to people arguing whether clients, contractors, or engineers would adopt BIM first. I think we now know the answer. Clients have a need for data. They will be running an asset for 50 years, perhaps, and that far outweighs the day-to-day concerns of contractors and designers. So I think we know the answer now.
Dejan, do you want to add the last point?
Well, I guess it depends a lot on the context, the particular country, in some, as in the UK, obviously, top-down work very well, still does. But then when you go overseas or maybe into Europe, you've got countries where you can't do that, so they are trying the other way. So yeah, I mean, context.
Okay. Okay, let's go to the standards. Okay. Let's see the status and the maturity. Okay, and which ones do we have to follow? Okay, this is an interesting question that a lot of people have. Nicolas, Dejan, are INFRA BIM standards prepare for a better collaboration nowadays?
I guess they are certainly encouraging that. They can't ensure it though, that's up to the companies, up to the projects, up to the organizations that use them. I gave the example of the academy earlier. That was Crossrail's way of ensuring that all the supply chain is collaborating with each other in accordance to or with their standards.
I think in terms of the process standards, ISO 19650, which is based on the UK standards, will help lead implementation around the world. As far as data standards are concerned, I think, well, first of all, I want to remind everyone that the whole point of standards is to reduce people's costs. It's to allow people to use the tools they want to use. It's allow people to be confident that their work can be absorbed into the bigger picture. So the Building Smart IFC standard has been around now for 22 years. There's a big push at the moment to make sure that it includes aspects of infrastructure. I mean, it's already being used for infrastructure projects anyway, but occasionally people get upset when they look at a bridge and notice that it's an IFC building. And if we can extend the standards to make sure it gets labeled IFC bridge, the world will be happier. The outcomes won't be very different, but the world will be happier with that. So we're trying very hard. We've got major initiatives being led by the Chinese and the Koreans on road and rail. We've got initiatives on ports and harbours, also being led by the Chinese, and bridges and tunnels, which are being led essentially by the Germans and the French. And these will expand the capability of IFC, and these standards will make a huge difference in the sense that we will then be able to do infrastructure projects, civil projects, and also those really big projects like railway stations and airports and so on, which are a mixture. And I think that's the key thing, that most projects turn out to be a mixture of all those different topics in one form.
Do you want how you work in Building Smart in the development of the standards? How you collaborate? Collaborate between chapters to develop standards. Could you explain how you work in Building Smart in the development of the standards? How you collaborate?
Building Smart is a federation of chapters around the world. I think we have chapters which are supported by industry, in some countries by governments, but mostly it's industry coming together to express their needs, and then Building Smart International then takes those needs and tries to develop standards that will allow the industry to be more efficient in various ways. So through a number of different rooms, including infrastructure rooms, rail room, airports, and so on and so forth, we formalize or analyze the problems and the needs, and then we try and make sure that we extend or introduce standards that support it. So the main standard Building Smart produced is the IFC, but we have others. We have the BCF format for exchanging issues and complaints. We have the data dictionary to try and help the industry become language independent, not just spoken languages, but of course the rather bizarre languages that tools like Bentley and Revit and ArchiCAD speak. So we have a data dictionary standard. And I'd also mention that we have a standard called, rather clunkily, MVD, Model View Definition, which allows people to specify what data they want at what stage. So we're trying to make sure that the industry has the tools to introduce automation, introduce automatic checking, introduce transnational working, so that it doesn't matter if you've got a consortium drawn from all over the world. They can use the international standards to work together.
Mr. Dejan, how Bentley helps with the development of the standards? What people can ask for software providers to work in an open BIM way?
Well, we are definitely involved in all these different groups, looking at how we can promote open BIM for better working. Obviously, we've got our own solutions that help our users do what they want to do. iModel would be definitely an example of that, quite known now, and iModel Hub was announced at the Year in Infrastructure, just tail end of last year. But yeah, by working in these different working groups, discussing things, how we can help the industry do what it wants to do, Bentley is definitely involved in all of this.
And Mr. Ezra, how can companies such as CCC, who are being the BIM revolution, and which is one of the biggest companies in the world, how can you collaborate in the development of the standards, and how you can help to governments to establish this new paradigm?
Okay, CCC actually started BIM since the early evolution, since early 90s. And CCC geographically spread in different locations, so played a great role actually of injecting this technology at the very early beginning, even to the level of conceptual, and gradually taking the lead in the evolution. The standards from CCC perspectives varies vastly, because we are dealing with different modules and different parts of the world. So with let's say the speed of the technology evolution, the material evolution, even the manufacture, where we have a lot of equipment, devices that still falling ahead of the standard. We are using actually a kind of on-ground standards, or the governor, the governor is CCC standards, which actually talks to different modules of international standard in different parts of the world. Standards, let's say internationally, are falling as benchmarks for us, but let's say the true governor as a general contractor actually the site situation and the different modules of authorities, codes, and different, let's say, complexity of different infrastructure projects is the true governor for us.
Okay.
Nicholas won't like this statement, but actually what you can do for vast projects in Africa or in the middle of the desert, like let's say in Saudi Arabia, the empty quarter, where we started since early 90s, and we didn't have even the word COBE in the market, or PAS, or whatever. We just have our CCC standards that, of course, aligned with the existing benchmarks and further developed to accommodate the industry in different modules.
So at the end, we will have a mix between software providers, leading companies, organizations that work for the development, but yeah, at the end is benchmarking. Yeah. Okay. Going to the business opportunities, okay, that we have for those companies who have invested and now are leading this new revolution. Mr. Ashraf, this is an example. Which benefits you have now being one of the leading companies?
CCC right now, actually, we don't have ceiling for that. And let's say we are challenging ourselves even in this industry. Where we early knocked the doors of construction, we invested a lot in consultation. We invested in the academic sector and operation and maintenance. And we have a huge development in that. And our, let's say, BIM engineers who started since early, they are leading now most of the mega projects around the world. We are quite, let's say, keen to particularity of this industry, and we are investing a lot in all aspects.
Maybe a business opportunity that you can have is to get more projects in facility management of the projects that you have built.
Exactly, exactly. We are dealing now with different, let's say, opportunities all over the world, and there is a quite promising areas in the Far East.
We have another example, which is the UK. UK now is offering your knowledge to other governments. Which opportunities you see that you have?
Well, I think the UK has discovered a degree of confidence that we've been able to go and take the standards, first of all, to the English-speaking world, and then through ISO to the whole industrial world. Most of the standards have been, for example, most of the UK standards have now been translated into Russian. And I think behind those standards there are training, teaching, software development opportunities that the UK is now picking up on. So in that sense, it's working. We also have ambitions to use the BIM initiative to actually find ways of reducing construction costs and carbon costs by 30%. So we're starting to think in great detail, not about the small improvements that you might make, but how do we radically change the industry on the basis that with accurate and reliable information, maybe there are processes we can completely eliminate and get buildings 50% faster or infrastructure 50% faster, 30% cheaper. So there are some really solid ambitions to take the whole industry to the next level.
Which do you think will be the next countries that will lead this revolution? I mean, there are countries that are growing so fast. Which do you think that will be the next ones?
I've certainly seen that smaller countries, it's easier in smaller countries. Norway and Singapore have had, and Finland, have had very sophisticated BIM initiatives running for quite some time. Because you can get industry in one room. Or in the case of the Norwegians, it was 35 Norwegians on an aeroplane who, on their way back to Oslo, decided to do BIM. So it should be easier for smaller countries. And it's interesting that both Ireland and Scotland, having watched the English UK government, so it's English government mostly, they are going ahead very fast. And in fact, in some cases, I'd say faster than England. So I think the biggest challenge is for the biggest economies. I think we've all seen that in the USA, they find it very difficult to think beyond lonely, private, individual BIM. And it's going to be very difficult for the very large economies to do it.
And if you are a contractor company or a firm that are leading BIM, which countries, Mr. Ashraf, think that are a good opportunity nowadays?
I think without leading aggressively this technology and building even smart cities. Right now, I'm talking, we are building smart cities, and Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid adapted the idea himself and validated since early 2015 and put it as a condition on all consultants and general contractors to adapt BIM. So I can say without second thought, it's UAE leading this area.
Which is the future of BIM? I mean, in 15 years, are we talking about BIM or?
I mean, I'm not the oracle, but we'll be more or less talking about smart infrastructure, I think. BIM is, let's say, the first step towards that. I mean, maybe some people take BIM as to mean a very wide thing, which it might not be, or it might be, whatever, but the goal is definitely to achieve smart infrastructure, artificial intelligence and all that sci-fi stuff,
Which is the future of BIM from your point of view?
I think it's the seed of artificial intelligence and how, let's say, you go on this clear digital environment in managing your assets by the sense of construction. So yes, it is BIM now, but I cannot tell in the future how it will be. But I can let's say foresee some gates are ready to be integrated with BIM, like IoTs and artificial intelligence, robotic industries, and all this can tell you the value of BIM right now and where it will go.
Not a fan of artificial intelligence as a phrase. I used to be 20 years ago, but then the guys at Amazon and Google turned it into guesswork. And I wouldn't cross a bridge that had been designed by Google as an average of all other bridges. So I think we have to be careful that we distinguish between real engineering and obviously what the new artificial intelligence can do is give us background to what we're doing. But I do think the industry desperately needs to check and prove that its designs, that its proposals are accurate, buildable, useful, safe. And so I think the domain of rules, of capturing the huge amount of knowledge that has existed in past and current generations of people in the industry, we're going to have to capture that. Because we can't afford the risk of building something that doesn't work or doesn't work at 100% capacity. So I think the next 10 years will see our human efforts being supplemented by really fierce checking of what we do. Usually when I'm speaking in the UK, I tell stories about what's gone wrong in the US, and when I'm in the US, I tell stories about what's gone wrong in Europe. With such a mixed audience, I'll just say that as an industry, I don't think we're very good at checking what we do until it's too late.
Okay, thank you. And now we're gonna open the questions to the public. Okay, we have 15 minutes more. Alexandra will give you the microphone. Aisam has it.
Okay. My name is Sami Mansour. I registered as an architect in Finland and in Egypt. I work as a BIM consultant, mostly on the architecture side. We've spoken a lot today about standards, government mandates, and implementation. But in my experience, we already have standards in the industry. We have too many standards. That's part of the problem. How are people looking at enforcing standards? Because without enforcement, the standards are pretty much useless. Opinions, thoughts, ideas?
Picking up on exactly what I just said, which was that we need the rules. We need to see the standards migrate from being written documents to being written documents that can be checked systematically. And the UK BIM mandate, April 2016, simply stated that the client, or that government, central government projects must demand data. The supplementary mandate, which came in October, was that they must have the means to check it. So we are moving towards the opportunity, because data is checkable, whereas documents aren't.
Who's doing the checking? And that's part of the problem. Like, we have level 2 mandated by the government, but there's nobody from the government doing the checking. So we're kind of going around in a circle without really getting a result.
Yeah,
I think
it's early days. I think when Singapore introduced automatic building code compliance checking, it was the designers who could submit any time they liked to find out if their design would pass. And it was only when you wanted the actual permit that you formally submitted and paid a fee and got your permit, knowing you were going to get it. So rule checking can be applied at every level. If you and the standards that we've got in the UK are becoming checkable. Things like CDEs are starting to enforce the real basics of a naming convention and metadata conventions. I think the quality of deliverables is checkable. The NBS toolkit offers the opportunity to check whether deliverables actually meet the requirements, and so on. So it's not that it's not there. Does my nose get bigger every time I lie? Yeah, it's coming.
Who's the next?
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Pasi. I come from Finland. And we had 2 weeks back, we had a conference there, and we were talking about BIM. And I'm working at a company called InfraKit, and we have a platform for infra construction, how to present as-built, comparing design models. And that's why I want to ask you how you see the situation in UK, maybe Ireland. If BIM models and design are quite far, we can do many things using intelligent softwares. But how to bring that intelligent design into construction, and how to really build something based on that, so that we can use this nice model at the site. How do you see it? What is the situation? I don't know. What is the situation in UK or in Middle East?
I think the contractors have been focused on the data deliverables that their client has been asking for. I think they're starting, and the better ones have also been looking at what opportunities they can get from accurate asset information. Some of them are investing in 4D planning. Some of them are investing in that for efficiency on site, resource smoothing, for health and safety purposes, and so on. So I think, given the initial push from the UK mandate, Contractors are now starting to explore what the opportunities are. At Hinkley Point, which is one of our new nuclear power stations, the whole process of concrete and reinforcement has gone paperless. Not because of any mandate, but because the people involved got together and figured out a way of making sure that the people on site had exactly the information they needed on a tablet. And so there is now no paper involved in that process. Now, you could stand back and say that's been done elsewhere, but to do it when there is that much construction happening on such a tight program is really exciting.
Feel free to add wherever you need. Okay? More questions?
Don't make it very difficult.
Very good.
Hello, my name is Marta. I work in the English industry, but I work in heritage buildings. So how implementing BIM in old buildings? Like, the problem is a lot of loss of money because you predict that you will find this, but then what you really find in the building is something completely different. So I'm not really sure how implementing BIM and how efficient it's going to be in all buildings, like many of them in London.
Site surveying or heritage buildings in Cairo. And I dreamt by this technology actually in one of the oldest Mamluk mosques. They're about to collapse and fall apart. And we were using everything by hand, climbing ladders, cleaning the dust of every, let's say, old element, including the patterns, without knowing or getting to any official records. We were surveying everything ourselves. Thanks for BIM now, and let's say the digital survey, where you can first get a full accurate survey of the actual situation and fetch digital records at least to compare and to record or update, and if you need to restore. Then you deal with everything as usual in construction as your construction asset or heritage asset. And this, let's say, depth of records and setting parameters will give you the full command on the valuable heritage. And then you can promote your parameters of, let's say, dealing with materials. What are, let's say, the precious materials you have to use? It's not just dealing with ordinary construction materials, but you have to deal with a mimic material that suit or interact safely with the building. I don't know, it's kind of sharing your interest rather than answering the question, but you took me back 32 years after graduation, and I would love to share you this kind of BIM implementation on heritage buildings.
Like regulations, you don't see much about old buildings. And we are still refurbished buildings, so I think it would be an important thing to be added into the regulations.
The good thing is there are lots of groups looking at this. So in the UK, we've got a group specifically focused on that. I forgot what the name is. I'm actually a member of Heritage Care, which is Spain, Portugal, and France, also looking at this topic. There's a huge project at the moment going on. And I know in Italy, they published articles not so long ago about what they're doing on this subject. So there's a lot of movement there. But it's true, yeah. Big problem.
It's coming up now in the UK. It was better in Spain, Italy, France. but yeah, I think it's something they have to improve.
Let's go to this side of the room.
Hello, hi. My name's Paul Brown. I work for London Underground. I just want to carry on with that question to say that I also hear this a lot of times. You can't do BIM on heritage or old assets. Some of our assets are like 150 years old and we've managed to do it. Some of them are grade 2 listed. We've basically built a digital model, attached data to it, survey, photographs, videos. Basil gets sewers, hundreds of years old. We've managed to do the same. So I believe that you can. And we return again and again to that asset to constantly renew it. And that's been over working on assets that are very, very old. So as well as the new stuff you see going up around London, we're also implementing it and utilising it and gaining benefits on working on old infrastructure. We used it recently to reline 50-year-old 300-metre section of tunnel underground. It's existing. It can work.
Anymore. It doesn't matter where you build, what you're building. Someone will have been there before. And so if you, whether it's a building or an old bit of infrastructure or whatever, if you don't start with a proper survey, then the project will fail in some direction or other. So if your client comes and says, oh, I don't want to pay X thousand pounds for a survey, we'll make do with a couple of ordnance survey maps and see how far we get. Walk away because they're idiots.
Surveys needed, along with real world, intrusive investigations. We brought it all together and put it into the model, into the common data environment. Everybody could work with it, and also inform the clients like English Heritage.
Do you want to add anything?
Actually, it's this answer maybe can serve both questions, your questions and the lady question. I think capturing what is existing on site and taking it back to the office where you can have a full BIM process is happening, and we have done it in several projects. So I think whether it's something being built for 50 years or just built and you want to take the data back to the site, the technology is there. You can use, for example, laser scanning, mobile laser scanning, image processing coupled with some vectorization work by some specialized team where you can digitize existing facilities and use it again in site. Integrated, as I said, there is no greenfield anymore. Many cities in the world will come to this fact that renovation and brown field projects are happening. All cities, such as London, will require so much innovation, and the next phase of projects will be such kind of projects, including heritage projects. So technology is there, the know-how is there. You just need to identify the correct workflows and make sure that you can integrate data captured from the site back to the office. Like the questions you have asked, I think it's something we have done using different techniques, and we can share this knowledge with you later.
Antonio.
Hi, my name is Antonio Tort, and I'm also architect and working in restoration. And just to add some point about implementing BIM data is to survey the continuous evolution of the materials in the buildings. In many countries, we have problems with humidity. So to monitor the situation and the evolution of some stones or some carpentries is very interesting to keep track of them if you put digital devices so that you can get the you can be aware if something is going wrong, to go against there and reinforce or apply treatments. So I think that digital data is very, very important, even in restoration and very old buildings in which I've been working for the last 25 years.
Hi, is that, yeah, fine. Dan Rossiter, BRE. Twofold. One, I'll tie on to the existing building element, and I'll also bring up a new topic, selfishly, in case anyone had anything else, sorry. With the existing buildings, a lot of that, it goes back to the standards being important, because one of the things that came up then was, obviously wonky buildings and those type of elements, and there are standards around tolerance and construction works that can help aid doing that. Shameless plug is, I've got my own blog where I look after my 120-year-old house using BIM, and I've done that process where I've kept it all under about 20 megabytes, and I've got all the data and property surveys linked to it and everything, and you can download all the files and play with them. I'll talk to you after about it. But the thing that came up earlier on whether there are too many standards or the difficulty in America using the standards, and I think what's important to try and do is to make these standards the easiest thing to follow. One of the things that we do really well is write good standards sometimes. A good example is an ISO you all use every day, which is ISO 216, which is paper sizes. No one in a different state in America or in a separate part of Germany invents a new paper size. There's a standard, we use the one sizes, the A, Bs or C series, and that's it. And if we can make the standards like that, where actually it's easier to use the standard than not to use it, then we're on to a winner. And how do we actually see developing up into the easiest solution, not one of many solutions, and how do we get to there? That's the question.
Sorry, so I'll jump back to your question briefly. I find that the bottleneck is a lot of times the client's understanding of their requirements. So to actually start using BIM in conservation work, you have to get the client to understand what the benefits of it are going to be, and that there are implications both cost and time-wise, but there are savings as well. Then jumping back to standards, you do say ISO standards for paperwork, but in the States they use ANSI standards. So that's the biggest problem. We do have too many standards. They aren't unified. No, well, yes, but they're not actually. So an A4 in the States is 7.5 by. It's been a long time since I worked there, but the equivalent of A4 in the States is not an A4 size. Yeah, it's 7.5 by 11, and then A3 is 11 by something else, and they're not the same. And if you've ever tried printing to a printer that's set to ANSI or that's set to American page size, you just get an error. It gives, you have both in the printer software, but if you keep it on the American system and print it, you get a printer error, and the page doesn't come out. Yeah, exactly.
I think one thing what we have been talking a lot in our group in Finland is that what is keeping us having a common standard is that everybody is protecting their own corner. We should step out for common good to find out what is the best platform to promote BIM or promote open standards as an industry. Because the fact is that the project owners, they are always behind. Because construction companies, they do business. They need to find how do I make good quality and lower cost. And whether we want or not, that will direct our business.
One last thing I'd like to say is that the way we say to the client is that you've got whole life benefits, And what you're going to end up with is an asset information model, and you could use that to operate and maintain the asset, so that when you go back to refurbish it in 50 years' time, in addition to all the benefits from running it, you can go in and use that data to update it. And that's what we're trying to do at London Underground. Digital model, operations linked to our asset management system, which is Maximo.
I'm sorry, my comment will be last after yours. I think, let me share this with you out of the context of the subject, because I'm sure that everybody would like to have standards. We are promoting standards, and I'm not against that. But I don't want to see standards as the target. We are seeing standards as being the target. The target is not standards. And I wouldn't love to walk in a street where all the buildings look similar, or go inside my house or different houses and then see that I'm seeing my own room. So I think that as long as we have architects and we have artists and there is innovation and there is new methods of thinking, we are not going to have standard building components. So we need to have our standards agile enough and flexible enough to accommodate our nature as a human being. What's happening, I think, and everybody's going to digital world, that we are killing the way we see things as human beings, and we start seeing things as 1 and 0. And we start to have more of machine-like thinking and not human being thinking. We are not like this. And we have to make standards that respect our nature, because otherwise we'll be controlled by robots tomorrow. And all the buildings will look the same, everything we are doing will be similar, and I think we will hate our life. Our life, if it is always the same. This is my perspective about standards. So standards are there to make the process easier, flexible, and to make it happen. And they are not the target. So even if there is no standard, it doesn't mean that we cannot do BIM. If there is no standards, that doesn't mean that we cannot achieve cost reduction or quality of life or sustainable assets. No, we still can do all this if we have good and reasonable standards.
Looking all around us, it's all about infrastructure.
So I think it's the society heritage to embrace and take care of the infrastructure. It is our asset. So it's everybody's asset to live in a healthy infrastructure platform where we can go, commute, do business, go to the school, take our kids to the school. So everybody is living in an infrastructure world. So that's why infrastructure is very important to the society.
Engineers from all over the world are using BIM to design, build, and operate infrastructure. The results obtained are spectacular, reducing times and cost along the whole life cycle of a project.
What we're finding nowadays is the owner-operators are starting to mandate the use of BIM on their projects because they understand the opportunity to pull the information that they require through the supply chain and use it for the operations and maintenance of these projects for the next 100, 150 years. And that's really where the key opportunity to save money and make people's lives better using this technology.
The content of the Global BIM Management for Infrastructure Project Certification Program is completely built on the experience of the Consolidated Contractor Company and its BIM Center and BIM Academy over the last 20 years in the most innovative BIM projects around the world. This online program is envisaged to take BIM implementation to another level of professionalism, practicality, and effectiveness in the field of information modeling and management for infrastructure projects.
Yeah, I think the initiative by CCC to train this specific area is excellent because there is no real qualification, no course available for this type of management course. And what we're seeing is so-called BIM managers who are really product experts coming up and saying, I'm a BIM manager. But in actual fact, the project delivery, particularly in large-scale projects, is much, much more complex and needs to be across disciplines. So I think the initiative they're taking of creating a course to train up specifically individuals to do this on a global level is going to really advance the industry.
Become a fully global BIM manager engineer by working collaboratively with other participants from the 5 continents. Develop real case studies of roads and highways, railways and metro lines, tunnels and bridges, and subsurface utilities. With Zigurat, you will be part of a global alumni network with more than 2,000 BIM managers already working in leading companies worldwide. Global BIM Management for Infrastructure Projects, 12 months online master program.
Well, welcome back. Thank you everyone for staying for the second roundtable, in this case directly pointing to education needs for BIM implementation in the infrastructures field. Let me briefly introduce myself, although I've done it personally with some of you. My name is Montse Delgado and I also belong to the team of the Zigurat Global Institute of Technology, which is an online education institution with global vocation. It is my pleasure to introduce again my colleague, Rafael Riera, someone that you met already a while ago, and that is leading our BIM programs portfolio at our technical school. Also introducing again Dejan Papic, who is Advancement Academies Manager here at Bentley Systems. Thank you for holding us too, for hosting us, sorry. And finally, last but not least, Mr. Issam El-Absi, who is the director of CCC's BIM Center and BIM Academy, but also he's the director of Zigurat's Global BIM Management for Infrastructure Certification Program. Welcome, everyone, again. And let's start by discussing about the role of BIM manager these days and its evolution. Before we go ahead with this topic, let me deliver a couple of practicalities. Let's try to raise questions at the end of each panel or each topic, which will be probably more dynamic and easier. And then we will be sharing a micro. So if those sitting, could come, those sitting in the last rows could come closer, probably this really is the dynamic of the session. Okay, I would appreciate if you could move if you feel comfortable. So let's go ahead. Let's go with the role of the BIM manager. We have some BIM managers in the room, so everyone will have something to say, but we have people from the academy, good profiles to share about it. I think it would be interesting in this case to start by hearing each of you on how this profile has been evolving in the recent years, especially during the last year. I don't know. Let's just start in this case with Dejan, please.
Thank you. It's a good question. What is a BIM manager? I mean, there are so many different jobs so-called BIM managers do in the industry. Everything from project manager's job, design manager's job, and others. The reality is everyone on the project needs to do BIM. So in my opinion, BIM managers should be someone who's looking after the compliance, making sure everyone is following the requirements, everyone's following the standards, the processes. In the beginning, sure, setting them up. And I think a lot of the industry is actually doing that.
Okay, I think if come to the question how this profession has evolved the last year, I'll give you a figure. In 2016, as CCC, we were approached by tenders that, let's say, the amount of contracts requesting BIM manager have increased 5 times in 2017. So I think this is a good indication that people started to realize the importance of this role and the criticality of this role as a BIM manager, regardless of the definition of it, which we'll come to it later. But there is an increased demand in this post, I think, worldwide. What we have seen is in tenders coming from different parts of the world, from Asia, from the Middle East, and in Africa. And really, there is a serious increase in demand on that post.
I think that an interesting responsibility of a BIM manager is the implementation of BIM in every project or even in the company. And I think that it will be a huge market for these coming years, the implementation. And I think that, well, it's something that you can learn in these programs in Zigurat. And well, maybe we will say like it's like a CTO, the Chief Technology Officer in a design firm or in a constructor company. And well, we will have to see if in the near future the technology and what is the construction itself will go closer or more separate, because at the end we'll need more specialized people in the field of technology than just the construction, and we'll have to see if we will have separate profiles or everyone will be like a BIM profile, no?
I think, thank you, Rafael, for that. I think if we come to the role of a BIM manager, I think from CCC perspective, which we have been doing this for the last 20 years, this spans from design, because we have done design projects during construction. We have done construction projects, and extends up to post-construction, and let's say talk about facility management, operational maintenance, and so on. So the role of a BIM manager really expands through this whole life cycle of a project. And in each, for designers, it can have a definition. For construction, it might have another definition. For operational maintenance, it should have a different definition or roles. Now, seconding both gentlemen' input, what they said is true, and I believe that the role of a BIM as a BIM manager in few years will disappear, and it will be embedded in each and every profession. So all of the people working on a project will have the title of BIM. So somehow, even if he's not called the BIM planner or a BIM cost controller or a BIM operational maintenance manager, it will be embedded in his boss. So each and every stakeholder in the construction process must be fluent and understands his part of BIM. So I think that the role will expand drastically, and it will be part of each and every one profession, I believe.
And definitely. An interesting example from Crossrail. So Crossrail was very encouraging to everyone working on it to educate themselves as much as possible. So the creation of the Crossrail Bentley Information Academy was to that end, and they encourage even profiles such as receptionists to come to the academy. They did quite often, get educated about BIM, about the digital idea, at least at the higher level. And I think it's so important that all the profiles understand it,
Someone wishing to add something? Okay, Dan, please.
Hi, thank you. Yes, Dan Roster, BRE. I just wanted to reiterate, I think it's really good what you're saying about embedding it into other roles. I think the problem was when you first started discussing it, you used words like profession and role. And what we need to really think about is that it's not a role as such, it's a function. People on projects do information management. And that if you work on a very large project, that might be the only thing you do on that project. But because not everyone does super large projects all the time, there needs to be flexibility. And I think whoever does information management needs to have core construction skills, whether they be project management, architectural design, subcontract, whatever. But you have to have that background construction knowledge and upskill people to do it. When we talk about information manager as a role or as a profession, we're delegating. when we actually need to be upskilling what we do. So I think it's really positive to say that, and the intention from the UK standards point of view was always to do that. And I think the market's gone off to create this kind of standalone role, and I think we need to start pulling it back to make sure that everyone does it and not just that one person who has read a couple of standards and is pretty whizzy on the software.
I think I agree with you. I think the roles themselves are going to change, and a lot of them are going to disappear. They're merging into roles that they should have been. Certainly from an architecture side, things like, I've been saying this for a while, that things like BIM coordinators should really be the project architect. It's not, it shouldn't be a separate role. I think there's also an issue with the naming. So nomenclature, people think BIM is separate from everything else, and it shouldn't be. We should kind of erase that from the way we kind of use the word. So yeah, the roles will definitely change over the future, but it's also dependent on the size of the practice, size of the company, and what you're doing, the kind of industry you're in. So yeah.
Thank you. I just want to ask you one thing. Like, if we Google the role of a BIM manager, the most common in all the roles on Google we find is companies are asking for 5-year experience in Revit from a BIM manager. Revit is a common wordly used, so that's why I'm using. If you can Google it, you will find like 5-year experience in Revit. Do you think BIM manager should be excel in any software? Like, he needs to be excellent in software, because on Google they are mostly asking for Revit. Let's say Revit or any Bentley software. I'm not bothered. I'm just asking you in a general sense. Does a BIM manager needs to be excellent in a software?
Anybody would like to answer?
Sure. I guess it depends on the context. In some instances, software is definitely necessary, but more or less, information management is the skill that a so-called BIM manager should have. Software, it's not essential.
In our definition for the role of a BIM manager in CCC, based on our experience and the input of all the BIM managers that we send to site, is almost 20 points. The last of them is knowing a solution on BIM. So it's okay if you know Revit, it's okay if you know EcoSim. There are more important roles and responsibilities for a BIM manager that comes before the knowledge of the authoring solution. So I think it's important that whoever is working in BIM knows an authoring solution, whether it's Revit, whether EcoSim, or Rhino. It adds to his knowledge and capabilities, definitely, but it's not like. So what you see on the internet is misleading, and this is one of the problems that the industry is lacking behind, because they think that software is driving this and should be the process who drives this. We know our construction process better, and as such we need to drive the process, not the software vendors, or neither Revit, neither EcoSim.
Because like Revit, to use Revit is a job of a technician. It's not a job of a manager. Use Revit or any software, that's the job of a technician.
Well, this is debatable, we can discuss it, but I disagree with that. I don't think it's the role of a technician, because all the BIM engineers and all the BIM staff and my team are engineers. And there is a reason behind that, and that's why we are excelling so well in BIM. But we can discuss this separately.
I think Nicholas wishes to add something.
Managers are there to manage people. A football manager manages the team, not the ball. Okay? So I think we must be very careful about assigning the role manager and using that term unless their job is to manage people.
Hi, I just want to say one more thing. I bet you in this room here now, the dominant, sort of discipline are like engineers, architects, what you need to be doing is getting more project managers in there, procurement, legal, planning. Give you an example, planning, I showed planning, 4D planning. They called me a witch to be burned at the stake. These guys need to learn as well. So the other disciplines need to be brought on the bus, digital BIM bus as well.
Well, thanks so much for all these contributions. Rafael, just before we move on.
Yeah, maybe one of the problems is the lack of standardization in the profiles. So when a private company or whoever asks for a BIM manager, maybe they don't know which kind of profile they are asking for, no? And maybe they just know about Revit and they ask for a Revit large experience. So I will say that if we don't specify which skills a BIM manager need in different phases or in different kind of companies and different situations, it will be difficult for private owners or directors of companies to ask for BIM managers. And well, I think it's something interesting to discuss, because for example, we are training BIM managers, but you see a lot of kind of courses in BIM management. So where is exactly a BIM manager? No?
Well, so now we move on to the next topic, which is my organization doing enough BIM? This question was raised from Sweden. That was one of the questions that we collected before during the pre-event preparations. And apparently it was written by an owner of a small contractor company. Isam, when is enough? How can we know if our organization is doing enough BIM?
Well, this is a tough question, and answering it in a few minutes might be difficult. I'll try to be direct to the point. I believe that BIM is just a tool, and what we are targeting is the outcome from BIM. You know, I know that BIM is. I love BIM myself, but this is not my target. So I believe you can realize that you are doing good BIM when you start getting benefit out of BIM. So I can't say enough, but you are good. You are making good utilization of this technology. Once you feel you are cutting costs, making a safer construction, finishing on time, increasing the quality of your product. If none of these are met, or you are, if you introduce BIM and you lose money, then okay, even if you make success story and you publish it maybe in an event like that and say I did a great achievement by doing a shop drawings extraction, for example, this is fine, and it's good. But this doesn't make you a successful in BIM, and you say stop, I can stop at this point. So I believe you can say I am doing good when you feel that you are gaining really benefits out of this technology. And this is what we are targeting as technology. We need to achieve good ROIs. We need to maintain sustainable construction. We need to make sure that we have safer construction.
You can't do enough BIM. You either do it or you don't do it. You can do it poorly or you can do it well. If you do it well, then you're going to win jobs and you'll deliver the outcomes your client is looking for. That's what I think.
Well, maybe there's a confusion when public administrations, for example, ask for projects in BIM. Maybe they don't ask for results, or so basically the BIM is the target, but they don't ask you for better results, or and maybe this is what they ask when what is enough BIM, just modeling, or maybe I make BIM but I'm absolutely non-efficient. So
Thanks, Pasi, because I saw you knocking all the time.
Yeah, I almost applaud this, because I really like what you said about that what we see, that people think that when we practice BIM, we have solved something. And it is really their target. And I really liked it, and I agree what you said about that. It's a tool, like a mobile phone. It's a tool. I'm sending a Twitter. That's your message.
So, okay. So let's move on to the next question. Dayan, are architectural firms in a more advanced phase than construction companies and engineering firms specialized in infrastructure in this sense?
Some of them definitely in what they do, you know, because they do a different job. So they don't do the same thing, you know. Architects are there, at the beginning, you know, to design it. And constructors do different things. Certainly BIM has evolved through years. It was more popular or widespread in the architecture community. So it's been there for a longer time, but I think we've gone quite a long way from building information model to building information management, which I think is the prevalent idea now.
Well, so let's keep going. Let's move on now about to discuss about the key profiles to train. Okay, in this case, I have a common question again to place to each of you, because it's also something connected to a question that we received from Qatar, I have to say. What are the key profiles in an organization to be trained to lead the future in the infrastructure field? So concretely in the infrastructure field.
I guess for the time being, when you start the process, you think of how can I create a BIM, a good, healthy BIM design. And this means that the people who are authoring, who are building and putting information using my authoring tool should be first trained. This might be architects, engineers, technicians, if necessary, mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, and so on. So all those who are contributing to the design phase and inputting information, they need to be trained first. And then you go to the second stage when you transfer this model from, if it's going to be transferred in a good, healthy world, we're going to give this data to the construction. So this means that the contractor should be capable of reading this information, managing it, enhance it, and go for construction. Which means that the people who are doing planning, maybe estimation, time management or schedule management. Yes. Yeah, schedule management, sorry. And cost control, quality control, and maybe something like payment certificates should be trained how to utilize BIM to extract this information. Now, towards the end of the project, you need to train people who are involved in the handing over process, such as those who are giving data to the client, documentation, data sheets, asset information, geographic information systems. So during the life cycle of the project, there are certain people that need to be well prepared before starting this phase. So I believe there is many stakeholders that should be trained during the life cycle of a facility, from design, during construction, until handing over.
Exactly, and as I said before, I mean, on Crossrail, everyone was encouraged to come through the academy because everyone needs to understand it, everyone needs to be involved. I gave you the example of receptionist. You know, you might not think that's a role that should be BIM savvy. Maybe not BIM savvy, but you know, they should be aware. There are lots of security challenges when it comes to BIM. We're creating digital information. Everyone needs to be aware of what the secure practices are. One role that I think is still missing, and I mentioned it in the previous roundtable, is data scientists, whatever you want to call them. We don't monetize the information that we create enough. We just create it for contractual purposes, and we don't look beyond that. You know, we create it once, we use it a few times, but we don't use it in different contexts. You know. And that I think is the role that's going to have a huge impact on what we do.
I just want to second his point about data scientists. And I think we realized this in CCC, and we have a whole department within BIM that manages information and data. And even within our organization, we have created a whole department that talks about data analysis and data automation. And this department is interacting a lot with BIM, getting a lot of information from us. And as I said, part of this team is within our organization. So I second what he has said, and I believe this is an important role, how to use this information, how to leverage this experience that you have captured during the construction life cycle before and after, and make analysis of the information you are capturing.
So, okay, that's great, because I was going to point, I was going to point you actually, so. Thank you.
Just because I have met the CCC in Middle East. I was 2 years ago trying to establish our business in there and talk to some of your guys. And but the question is, when we go to site and we have these good designs, how you manage the data flow from designing software to excavator or machines at the site and then get as built back? Do you have a process for that already?
Thank you. Definitely, it's not an easy process. And the most difficult part of our business is how to make the people working at the construction site to realize the digital world, respect that somebody is telling them what they have to do, and then capture their input from the construction and put it back in the office where they share the same. So what we need to have is an information model that is up to date. So this requires the direct input from construction team in our operation. So this is really a challenging process. And we've been trying this for the last 5 years. Only recently, the last 3 projects, we managed to get good results from the construction team. So just let me brief you what we are doing now. So we are creating tasks from our complete platform, which we call it BIM. It's not only the model, it's many systems integrated together. So we create for each foreman a task that he has to do. And this task is sent to site on a hard copy that is somehow smart, so we can be scanned at the end of the day to tell us what he has achieved of construction. This applies to 2 things: information captured from the construction team, which comes on this task list, and surveying information which gives us the exact location of each and every component. As I'm telling you, we just started doing this. We managed to do this only in 3 projects out of hundreds, and it was really challenging. And I will tell you within the next 24 months how are the results coming from construction sites.
Besides data management again, someone else has an intuition or a feeling that is wishing to share about education and key roles in the future? One. Okay, thank you.
Ali, I was going to say that I think there's a load of questions in the industry being asked about data scientists, data analytics and so forth. I think it's very important because we're now gathering data not just from our assets, but from assets from other industries like electric, utilities, that sort of thing, and other things like buses, so that we can operate and manage our system and also inform us for future designs. You've got an oyster ticket here. We know exactly where you've been. We can see the passenger flows. We can tweak the system to accommodate. And that info helps us to design future systems.
An answer, Sammy?
Not really, but I think it's also important to not forget that the clients need to be educated as well. It's not just the teams that need to be educated, or the working teams, but the client, because certainly in my experience, I get a lot of clients talking about BIM this, BIM that, but they don't really see beyond the, those 3 letters. And you have to explain to them very early on in the project. This is super important. It has to be early in the project what you can get out of it, what the consequences of using it are, and what the benefits of using it are. So yeah, there's educating the clients as well. It's super important, I think.
I just grab it. So I second with what Sami said, and in Finland we have founded few companies together. We are training our customers. We don't sell anything in that platform. But yes, of course, it's visible who are we. But to educate them without thinking of business, because we know when they are educated, when the knowledge increases, they will also need us and our services. Very important point.
Thanks, Ahmed. So, platforms to educate customers. Actually, that's what we do too. But so, in going back to our list of questions, Rafael, which levels of BIM training programs are we offering at Zigurat Global Institute of Technology?
Well, I think that something interesting in the BIM Academy is that we see a lot of Master of Science in BIM, which actually you are studying like a field, okay? And we try to train profiles, professional profiles, okay? We work to train people to be productive since the first day in their companies. Okay, so this is why, for example, we have developed this this certification program together with CCC. Okay, focused in infrastructure projects. Okay, we see that there are other Masters of Science that they see some buildings, some infrastructures, but we really believe in train specific professional profiles. Okay, and in this case, we will be training BIM managers for this kind of projects. And well, when we are talking about levels, in this case we have two levels. The first part of the master, which is the BIM modeling phase, okay, where you can choose different specializations, and then the construction management and the BIM management. Okay, so well, I will say that we try to train specific professional profiles for specific skills. Okay, we don't try to teach how to work in the field or in a field. It's just how to work in a specific professional profile or role in a company.
So going back to the table now, in this case, my question is for Diane. According to Bentley's practice in consulting, what are the basic requirements that you recommend in order to have a fruitful BIM implementation in a project?
I guess there are many different things. I don't know, executive sponsorship, outcome understanding, definition of pilot projects. Maybe the one that I'd like to especially mention, we encourage all our account managers who are engaging with various accounts to bring those people first to the academy. So we talk to them about BIM, we make them understand what we mean by BIM, we see what they mean by BIM, and then in that way we can form a positive partnership that's actually fruitful to all of us, you know.
Thank you. In this case, we are opening, unless that someone wishes to add something, but in this case it was a best practice sharing. So let's open the next panel. That is titled How to Become a True BIM Manager with this certification. This certification is the Global BIM Management for Infrastructure Programs certification program. Isam, this question is for you as a director of the program. How it will make an impact in the sector?
Another tough question. Thank you. I believe that what is behind this program is 20 years of experience. We have been doing BIM since 1997. So you can realize that we have developed a lot of skills, a lot of tools, a lot of workflows, processes, that can or that lived the experience of construction site. So what we have done is we tried many times, many projects, until we realized the best way to do things using this tool. We have explored many solutions. We have explored many things, and we managed to find a lot of solutions and workarounds for running problems on construction, whether it is design coordination, whether it is planning, whether it is project controls, which one of the most important things that we offer is how we use BIM to manage and control the project 3 aspects: quality, time, and cost. So I believe this vast experience and on hands-on practice, which we delivered a lot of projects using this methodology. So if you look in the current industry, the age of this technology is maybe few years. Can we say 7 years, for example? The age of our experience is 20 years. So it's almost 3 times what any project could have lived using this technology. So what you are getting is really hands-on experience and hands-on practice. This is something very important. Second thing is that we look in BIM as a way to control the whole construction process. And this is not really a common practice now. If you look in the BIM workflows, they focus on the design coordination part and how to use BIM to manage clashes and avoid constructability issues on site. But this is only a small sector of what we are providing currently to our projects and our clients. We're using BIM to make sure that not only the construction operations are running smoothly, but also within budget and within the time specified. And also we are looking for the client relation, how we can take the information managed and collected and captured during construction, structure it, capture it, create assets for the client that are ready to be translated and transferred and sit in his asset registry or has asset database or asset solutions. And the same applies for operational maintenance, whether it is facility management integration, as well as geographic information system integration. So we bring to the students all this amount of experience and background in this course.
Still, may I still ask, in one sentence, what makes it unique?
The 20 years of experience that we had and the full life cycle implementation.
Okay. In my case, anytime that I hear the academic programs or our schools directors speak about the education that we are offering at Zigurat Global Institute, I always recall we are disrupting education from industry, and at the same time, we disrupt industry with education, because I believe that is something that is uniting us in this room this evening. At the golden hour, I have to say, at a beautiful time in London with beautiful views. Let's go ahead. Rafael, how do you ensure quality in the learning path in online learning? That's a very common question that we receive very often from candidates planning to enroll our programs. Can you address that?
Well, Zigurat was the first institution in Spain to offer education online in the building industry. Okay, so we were very innovative in this kind of education, and now there are a lot of universities that are offering this kind of education, online education, but it's important to adapt all the education to this methodology. I mean, if you record some classes that are on site and you offer them to your students that are abroad, actually this education is not prepared for the online education. It's just an on-site classroom that is being recorded and give it in streaming or online. No? So and moreover, we have very different kind of online educations. Okay, for example, in Zigurat we have 3 kind of ways to learn in a digital environment. Okay, so I will say that this kind of education is like the digital transformation of the education, and it's really important to know which will be your environment, which will be the main characteristics of this education. And well, in this way we work with a leading platform called Canvas, and I think that to learn BIM in a digital environment, it's like the natural way, because We make the students work with BIM servers collaboratively through digital platforms, and well, I think that it's a natural way to learn BIM specifically, and well, we are very focused in this methodology. So I will say that well, and something that it's really interesting is that sometimes people think that when you're studying an online master, you will be alone during all the year, isolated in your home, looking and reading PDFs and watching videos. And in this case, I think that these masters are more social than masters that are on site, because you know a lot of people from different countries. You are always speaking with them. You are collaborating with them every day. So I would say that they are more sociable than on site. For example, sometimes when we see three guys in a table in a bar and they are speaking, they are messaging through WhatsApp, you say, oh, they're very isolated, but maybe they are speaking with 20 people each one, no? So it's like it's more sociable, and well, it's something interesting.
More sociable, more vivid. Actually, that's also what I expect right now. What do you expect of online education? Thinking of BIM, okay? Okay, we have a candidate to respond that.
The thing I might find a bit more difficult, sometimes you are seeing on your screen some issue, then we've kind of solve it using the sky and sharing the screens, but sometimes it's not enough. It's kind of difficult because then when you are working in the industry, then you just go around the corner to the other office, and then you have the option to share. You have both, but when it's an online course, you only have the option to use internet or sharing by servers.
Okay, so Dayan, in your understanding, is online learning the best way to respond to the growing and global demand for BIM professionals? Because, you know, the classic universities have limited seats.
I guess there are pros and cons in both approaches. Depending on the topic that you're trying to learn. Let's say if you're doing software training, probably online is quite easy. You know, you can follow the instructor with your piece of software. Bentley's got online e-learning server for that. But what we've discovered through the academies, let's say through the BIM sessions, BIM introductory sessions especially, even people who sit in the academy, you know, you try to, you present to them for, I don't know, 2 hours, you know, very few responses. You try to engage with them, very few responses. At the end of the day, you ask them, so is our understanding better? Again, very few responses. So that engagement is, even in live sessions, it's quite lacking. In online sessions, I think that's even more so, you know. So, yeah, I mean, to address the global, address the issue on the global scale, definitely, yeah, online is the way to go because you can reach everyone. But to really get to the point, intimate sessions of a few people, person to person, there's no beating that.
Okay. Pasi?
Sorry to interrupt you again, but I agree what you said about the pros and cons. But what is, I think, the most important when you have online studies that you do, it requires self-discipline, because there are no other to kick your, you know, than yourself. But the good thing is also that if you don't get something in the first time, maybe you can listen it the second time or third time, and you can just focus and have it on your speed. And I think that's today's way of studying. I have done some courses online, and it is difficult when you start it because it's different way. But when you get to know it's actually pretty cool. You can do it at home.
It is, of course, flexible, one. And two, adult. You are there because you chose it. It was your choice. So, and it was your money sometimes. Sometimes it's open education. Well, I will only raise one more topic, and then the floor will be yours. We are expecting a lot of questions. Last topic is 21st century distributing and sharing top knowledge, because actually BIM in infrastructure is these days top knowledge. Not many are experts yet. We are getting close to the end, so this is the last common question. How is your organization or your institution contributing to the BIM implementation at a global scope? And how are you decentralizing this top knowledge I'm putting now on the table?
Okay, very interesting question. Let me start by saying in CCC we have established a BIM Academy 7-8 years ago. And this is a classroom education. And during these 7 years, I was always receiving requests from CCC employees who knew about the academy, but they are either on sites, they are in remote areas, and really they cannot come to the academy to receive the classroom education. So actually this was one of the motivations to go in a partnership with a reputable organization like Zigurat, where we can distribute our academy education and our experience the last 20 years doing BIM, and to distribute it to the market. The second thing was that I have seen a lot of education running in the industry, and unfortunately this education really lacks depth. It's mainly software education, and as such our industry is lacking behind the technology because of the education being offered mainly as solutions, as software solutions. BIM is far more beyond that, and it's only a portion of it. It's important to use good tools. We must use good tools for that, but focusing or limiting the BIM process and the software part is really killing the development of BIM and advocating it further in the construction industry. So I believe that things like our academy, Zigurat Institution, Bentley Academy, are playing an important role in taking education further as industry, to the industry itself, by industry leaders to the industry professionals. So the way we thought it's a good way to distribute our knowledge is through online education, and we opted to have partners such as I said, Zigurat and Bentley, to distribute our really rich BIM education further.
Thanks. Just to make sure we all understand, because we're all talking about academies, so BIM Academy by CCC and Zigurat is different to Bentley's Digital Advancement Academy. Actually, about half of you are sitting in it today. So that's Bentley's way of decentralizing top knowledge. We started with Crossrail, and we are expanding that into a program of academies around the world, always connected to major projects, owner-operators, contractors. This one was dedicated to Crossrail. Now others are joining it. You can see the banners on the technology pods. We are trying to connect all these academies through top-of-the-line audiovisual systems. You can see the cameras and double screens. The point is we want to create that personal live environment, in-person environment online. You know, we've got an academy here in London. We've got one in Pune in India, one in Houston in America. We're just finishing one in Dubai. Beijing is coming online. There are others. We want to connect all these academies. We want to share the knowledge gained on all those projects connected to those academies between all the academies. So, for example, you've got Maha Metro project happening in India. You want to bring those experts into the academy in Pune. you want to bring experts into the academy in London from the ecosystem here, and you want them to talk to each other. You want them to share best practice. You want them to share knowledge. And I think it's a very exciting program that we are undertaking or have been undertaking for some time now, but looking to do it even more ferociously in the near future and in the coming years.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I think that here there's an interesting word which is decentralizing top knowledge, okay, and which is related to the globalization. And digital education allows this decentralization of knowledge. 15 or 20 years ago, if you would like to have this kind of knowledge, you had to be in London or in Paris or in the main cities. And if you were in Pune or in any other part of the world, you basically are not able to have this knowledge. Or you come to live here for a while, or it's just difficult, no? And I think that we are in the digital revolution, okay, and in the globalization, and I think that this is why it's interesting to be in this digital environment, okay? And this kind of partnership with CCC allows us to offer this kind of training and this knowledge to all over the world. I think that there are not too many programs like this one. I really didn't see anyone. How do you really see a lack of knowledge in this kind of projects, like in BIM management around the world?
Yeah, I mean, at the very least, if I can say awareness. I mean, we went into various projects saying they're doing BIM level 3, you know. I mean, that might not have an effect on the actual project delivery, you know, but it shows a clear lack of understanding of what they're doing. But, you know, those kind of statements usually lead to discovering very poor practices, you know. You take a look at their common data environments and, you know, they're just not the single source of truth that we're trying to build. So yeah, definitely, building information marketing is a powerful thing, you know. Everyone is saying how great they are, but there are few really exceptional projects. Many are lagging behind.
And well, in the other roundtable, we finished discussing about the future of BIM. And maybe we can open a little discussion about the future of education. I think that the future in the education in the near future will go through blended versions in universities and wherever. I think that it's quite stupid to have a professor that it's always explaining the same year by year. And the key point is the decentralization of the knowledge, and if we can have a lecturer from Harvard that can give you lessons in some of the universities around the world, and then you can have repetitive lessons or just the basic ones online, I think that blended versions in universities and wherever will be the future for sure. What do you think?
I totally agree with you that definitely a classroom education is appealing to a lot of us. But of course, as you said, it's not easy. You cannot have it all the time. And of course, it's, some people cannot even have it at all. So, so I think blended versions will be the most appealing. And I think online education will take, let's say, will serve 85% of the purpose. And maybe 15% will be left to cases like what you have explained. You need someone to interact with, gives you a direct answer to your questions, or maybe make some work group projects, shared projects that can make you understand the process better, enhance your confidence in what you know. And this, I think, will be very nice to have this blended version of education, online and physical.
And especially when you're partnering with someone as experienced in construction as CCC, definitely.
Well, just 1 minute. Actually, blended education apparently brings the best of presential education and the flexibility of online learning. So that's quite good. And now Pasi has the word.
It was really good to hear what you said about this education, and I think there is room for classroom education, and basics needs to be learned in some way. Engineering, for instance, there's a common foundation for that. But then when we come to today's development of, for instance, BIM, it's so rapid that professor from university, no matter how high rank university it is, they don't know what is the status of today at the site. And that is so important to get that knowledge. But then the challenge is also that when we work, I work in Finland, you work in globally, I know. But it's from our point that study what we do there. And it is right, but there can be also others who see it a little differently. How to give like knowledge to these people that is not from Bentley factor or from CCC factor, but it's more like universal factor. That's a challenge. But of course, if the label is that this is Bentley training, then it's Bentley training. And if it's somebody else's training, it's there. But then it can be difficult to go from Bentley to some other organization with that paper. I see that as one challenge for this education.
Yeah, I agree. One thing about what we do is it's, let's say, Bentley agnostic. We try not to mention technology at all. That's one of the points that we make in the academy. We are trying to deliver industry best practice, let's say. We've got people who are running these academies who are embedded in the industry. If you cut them in half, it's not going to say Bentley, it's going to say the industry, basically. And that's our goal, you know, because if we show the people who come to the academy that we are independent, that we are not trying to push software on them, they can then open their minds, you know. Otherwise, it's just, yeah, another sales pitch. How does that work? It doesn't, you know.
I totally agree with you that this is a challenge for many industry stakeholders. But let me give you maybe an overview of this program, because it will maybe answer some of your questions. As Rafael explained, the education is divided into two halves. One half has to do with the authoring, creating the information, and the other part has to do with managing the information. The other part, which is the most important part, doesn't have to do with any solution. So if you have information authored in any platform, you can still manage it and use it properly until you finish this process and effectively and from real practice. So I can name a few examples if it will make you understand my perspective. If you have you know, what's the point of having a model? The having a model is to be able to manage the scope, correct? Anybody who is looking for a correct model is not to manage the clash detection process, to be honest with you. And this is the misleading concepts in industry, that people are looking at the model as the way to resolve clashes, where it is not. The model is a way where you manage your scope. If you manage your scope, you can do everything in the construction process. You name it. Anything has to do with the scope. So, and in this master program, you learn how to manage the scope, which is a very important and key aspect of the process. And then use this scope for managing changes, for managing your payment, for managing your time, for managing your resources, and so on. That's why I agree with you. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. You still need to manage your scope. It doesn't matter where you are in this world. You need to manage your time. And you need to have the tools, the practical tools, or the practical workflows that enables you to control the process you are following. So I hope this answers your question.
Oh, it's me again. As someone who finds the process of education very kind of unappealing, it doesn't work for me really when somebody's trying to decimate their thoughts and their ideas to me. I find the best way personally for me learning, especially when I'm looking at something that interests me, is it's self-teaching essentially. I go through videos, I go through online forums, I go through papers, books, whatever. It's outside of this controlled environment. And the thing with that is, especially today, we have more and more resources available to us. Those who choose to go learn that in that manner, we have more and more resources available to us, with whether it's videos on YouTube or papers available online. What are you guys doing to increase open source information for people that actually want to learn without being behind a paywall?
This is actually giving me the opportunity to introduce you something that I was thinking to speak about later. And this is the Mega Projects Master Series, actually, which is a set of master classes. They are online, they are video, and you'll receive an invitation, for example, to subscribe for free, and they are Bentley certified, actually. Do you wish maybe to introduce briefly a bit about these master classes?
Actually, the idea of having master classes is to give you some knowledge, free of charge, for our partners and our, let's say, our clients. And this will give you a feeling of to decide what is the correct education I'm looking for, what is the correct process I'm looking for. It will make you understand the depth of the knowledge that you are receiving. It will make you understand the depth and knowledge of the instructors that we are going to provide you with the education during, if you opt to take the master program. Or maybe the knowledge that you are receiving is sufficient enough for you, and that's it. So you get this free education, and it's like a good, it's building the relation between us as partners and between you as one of our clients, if not now, maybe later. At least you will be able to distribute or share with others the importance and the level of quality that we are providing for our clients. So these master programs master sessions are about 10-15 minutes, and really interesting because they are direct to the point. They show you a lot of things related to the workflow, data management, for example, workflow, how to manage a scope, as I just explained, how a project like the Midfield Terminal building was built, how BIM was implemented there. So really, it is very rich sessions, and I encourage you to attend them, and it suits your expectations.
Just to give you a hint about them, one of them is about the Abu Dhabi International Airport project, and the BIM manager is actually sitting here, and that masterclass is held by Mr. Ashraf El-Grabi. So he can explain you a little bit more about our open source information. Any other questions?
There's a disadvantage of open source as well. We can't trust the information, because like I'll give you an example. I'm doing PhD, and most of in Viva in PhD, 90% of the questions are asked on research methodology, which we adopted. And I was too confused in the beginning to understand what does a research philosophy means. That's a technical terminology. It has 3 parts, like ontology, epistemology, axiology. I started same thing as others will do, searching on Google, watching videos on YouTube, and everyone is interpreting in their own terms. And there was one guy from UK. I started watching his video. What I have learned from my knowledge, he was saying something opposite. Then I said to my supervisor, I said to her that this is the video. He's saying this. Now whether I am right or he is right. One is right and one is wrong. And she said to the first question, what is the credibility of the source? Like the one who is teaching, is he doctor as well? Has he done his doctorate in this? I said, no, he hasn't specified anywhere. He said, that you can't trust the source then. That's the disadvantage of open as well, open education. I will put something on Google or on my YouTube channel, which I know, but what is the credibility that is the true knowledge or right knowledge? It may mislead many.
I can't answer on behalf of all the material on the web, but I can answer you on behalf of these master classes. These master classes are given by professionals who have practiced what they are saying, and they have delivered what they are saying. So what you can do is you can question their experience, their background, because their names are mentioned and their background is mentioned. I encourage you to test that and qualify our knowledge and qualification and background. This is a safeguard for you before you invest any money in master education. You need to know from where you're getting this education. Of course, you can test also the knowledge and background of Zigurat. You can test the knowledge and background of Bentley. Those are the names that we are coming from. CCC is one of the biggest contractors worldwide. And you can, so it is, I do encourage you to test and check before you get information from the web, because I know that a lot of it doesn't make sense.
Well, regarding universities, one of the problems I find studying in universities, when I did my degree, yeah, you study all the theory, and then once you start your career, the first time you go on site is that I don't know anything about it. And I had a luck that I've been lucky that I could go on site before I finished my degree and kind of start my career at that point. But so many of my friends from uni, they first went to like really good marks in uni, the best students ever, but then they go on site and they don't know what they're doing. That's a good thing I like about the Zigurat course, that it's more towards the industry, not towards the theory. You also have theory because you need it, but then they show you the study cases and a real project.
Well, I'm over than 32 years in construction business. Started from design, let's say, board days. There is no computers and there is no technology. So most of the question, I just simplify it in one thing. There's a big difference when you get your driving license and then when you learn during the years and you get an experience, you become attached to your vehicle. And there is a big difference when you put a GPS to guide you, where you can find proposal like the shorter, the cheapest, the fastest way, but you still have, let's say, the responsibility to drive and learn. All years, I'm still learning how to drive.
Need like a combination. You need to apply that theory to the practice. That yeah, you will know a lot of structural design, or how to calculate how the weights are, but then you go to the reality and you go to a site and it's kind of a different story, the way they approach to things. So yeah, basically it was that, like, you need to see the real cases because the books don't show you what is on site. And to learn, you need to see it.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you 100%, especially from an architectural perspective. We in the architecture industry, and I speak to a lot of people, there's some exceptions, but you come out of education and then you have to start learning again. So you come out of education, you get a job, and you spend, I don't know, 3-4 years learning on the job how to actually make drawings that will go on site that can be built from, and how a building goes together. Theoretically, we should know that from while we are being educated, but we don't. And then beyond that, there's another thing that's completely lacking in the architectural education side of things is the business side. So you leave school, you spend time learning how to be an architect, but then you have to learn how to run an architecture firm, and there's nothing anywhere that teaches you that. Even in industry, the only way you learn is you decide, okay, I'm gonna run my own practice, and it's a really, really difficult process. So yeah, you have to. Education needs a lot of thought.
It needs to get more involved with the practice.
Yes.
Like trying to apply the theory to real cases.
Careful. Yeah, so with that, playing with the driving analogy again, one of the really good things is obviously when you learn to drive as a learner, and then once you pass, you then learn to drive as a driver. And I'm pretty sure that any of us in the room, if we went to do our driving test now, we wouldn't pass. So there are different ways of doing things. Now, the good thing that Zigurat does, which is a lot of the other classroom courses and everything else, is they all expose you to the people who are creating the content. So you can look, as talking about, and say, well, this person, you can go online, I can find out they know their stuff. And, as we're talking about, there are universities out there who are respected as very good universities who haven't got a clue about any of this. There are people with multiple PhDs and masters who are even more clueless. And there are people like me with none of it who are meant to have some sort of clue. So it's very hard to judge that. Only the market will eventually do it. So I think if you're trying to do open source and you're looking at YouTube content and everything else, you've got to do what you should do with Zigurat, with all other courses, which is you look at it and you say, well, is that person someone to rely on? And you can do that with Zigurat, you can do it with other courses you buy, and you can't necessarily do that with Googling stuff. So I think it's an advantage that it gives you that exposure, and it's not just a wall of courses. It's saying this person did it, and you can click and find out what they're about.
So I totally agree with all these comments, and I'm an architect. And I'm a strange architect because I did a diploma in construction first and then studied architecture. It used to drive me nuts watching these architects trying to design things which couldn't be built, which is an odd way of doing it, right? So I spent all my summer vacations and my breaks actually on site. I've crawled through and wired reinforced bars together. I've poured concrete. I've done all that stuff on site, right? So I think everybody has that option to do that in their spare time. But what I want to do is just deflect the question a little bit, because it sort of points to people who, when I was an architectural technician, they locked me up in an office and said, you're not leaving the office because you're not qualified to go on site. So I sort of ended up not really knowing what was going on site. And after a year, they let me out on a lead and then took me on site and stuff like that. So the industry is at large. When I started 35 years or whatever it was ago, a German company only worked in Germany. A UK company only worked in the UK. A US company only worked in the US. Today, all these companies are international. Foster & Partners has 47 nationalities working in an office, right? The whole point about this whole BIM infrastructural organization and this training course, I think, is to impose and introduce the concepts of sharing information across countries, across borders. Now, when you work on a project like the Midfield Terminal building, what percentage of the people who are working on that project ever saw the project? Any ideas? On your team, yeah, but the engineers, the architects, the structural engineers, they've probably never even seen the project. Exactly. That's the point. The point is you have to learn to work with these teams remotely. So, I don't know what you do on social competencies, communication competencies, because there's language, there's body language, there's the way you write emails. That all plays a major role in today's engineering world. The Crossrail project has 29 sites across London. They had to make a decision, centralize everything in one location, or let them do their job and then connect them through a platform. And they decided to go through the platform. They could all see what was going on. They could all share each other's work, but they could just get on with doing what they needed to do. So I think that's really the heart of this type of education.
So social skills are not that soft anymore.
Okay, I just want to add a comment about what you just expressed about theory and going to site and facing the challenges. I will take a real example from the Midfield Terminal building, which was the architecture, the roof. The roof is a beautiful design, and a fantastic architect thought of simulating the sand dunes, as my colleague Ashraf, who's an architect, who talks about this beautiful design in a better way than me. But look at the consequences of having such a beautiful design that is not really studied thoroughly until the construction phase. And we'll tell you from practice what happened. Let's give you one problem. I'm not going to show all the problems, only one single problem. To draw something like this, it might need just a nice pen and a clever architect, and he does something beautiful. Correct, Ashraf? And he does it, and everybody likes it, and it goes to construction, and we tender for it. Now, when we go to real world and we start building this, we went to the fabricator. Simple process. You cannot go for construction until you does fabrication. When the fabricator realized that there is about 42,000 banners, beautiful. He has a factory, he can send it to the machine and he can cut it. Can you imagine there is no single bundle similar to the other? So you have 42,000 different sizes of bundles that he has to cut. Before he has to cut, he needs to engineer it. So it means that he needs to draw it. He needs somehow to give dimensions. He calculated the amount of hours required to do this. It will be 20 people for 2 years. Just to do for one aspect only. Of course, we had to step in and help, and we have done it. We finished it in 8 weeks using automation and techniques and BIM that we have. But the thing is that if we did not find a solution for him, he would never be able to finish the thing on site. And of course, a second thing, the cost of having this kind of different sizes is 4 times than having a standard size. Not even if the architect thought of the constructability of what he is designing, of the costs or the consequences of his nice, I would say, reasonable ideas, he would have thought twice before. Maybe he would have thought of how am I going to reduce the number from 42,000 maybe to 100. So this is a real, the cost of this, because of the geometrical difference, was 5 times more than the original cost. So time was extreme, complexity was extreme, and effort was extreme. And without having such a technology, really, we would never finish that. And if we were not have this technology and stepped in to help the poor manufacturer, he would never have knew what he has to do. So this is what I want to say. When you come to practical aspect, it is different when you get it from practitioners, different than doing it in the office in a closed place.
Well, I think it's time. This is coming to an end. I guess that this will be the closing words, and I would like to thank everyone, and I wouldn't like to miss anyone. So let me see. First of all, thank you very much, Dayam, Papic, and also the entire Bentley Systems UK offices for your help to set up the event, for the opportunity to be here, and also to learn the way you are disrupting the sector and the way you are trying to doing technology agnostic awareness work. Thank you very much to our partners, the CCC team that is here. Thank you to the entire Zigurat team that made it possible, to those at home that chose watching us instead of joining us here. But thank you very much to each of you sitting there for all the questions you raised. Please make sure you still raise more questions after this. Thank you.